In this video, we're going to create crystal growing structures. Let's have a look at what we're going to end up with. So you can see it creates these crystal structures, and it also deforms the mesh from the base as they're growing out. It pushes the mesh out, and we're going to use a wet map to create that deformation. So let's get started. I'm going to start with a sphere. I'm going to change the type to icosahedron, and we're going to put 100 segments in there. We want it quite dense so that we can help with the deformations. I'm going to create a new material and turn off reflectance because we don't need that. I'm going to go to the color channel and I'm going to choose noise. Go into our noise channel and we're going to change the contrast to about 95%. I'm going to change the global scale to 300%, and let's just drop that on our sphere. And you'll see it's not what you get in the viewport, isn't what you get in the render, but you can get an idea. And let's get back in. I'm going to change the editor so it animates the preview. Let's go back to our color channel, and what we're going to do is just going to simply animate the brightness channel so that it goes from black to white. So we'll set a keyframe at frame 1 and then choose where you want it to end. Let's say 300. Just put the brightness all the way up till there's pure white in the preview. And that's just going to give us our animated map where the particles are born. Okay, next thing we want to do is we want to call this one base, and we're going to control copy it. So control drag, we'll call this one outline. And with this new one selected, I'm going to go into our noise texture channel and choose layer. That's just going to give us a layer shader. So go in there and select the preview and control drag up. That's going to give us a copy. And we're going to set this one from normal to burn. And that's going to create a nice little outline. So we can drop that on our sphere as well. And you can see the outline grows across the surface as well. And obviously it'll look different in the render if you want it to render. But that's fine. We're just going to use that to grow the crystals. Okay, the next thing the sphere needs to be is editable. So let's make it editable. Hit C on your keyboard. And we're going to go into poly mode. We're going to choose select and add a vertex weight. Leave that at 0. Just hit OK. Then with the sphere we're going to right click. We're going to choose X particles, wet map tag. And with that selected, we're going to drop the vertex map in the vertex map out slot and turn off render only. Okay, so that's that set up. What I'm going to do is just going to drop another texture on top so that we don't have to see the maps that we previously made, because we don't need to see them, they're just there to help with the particles. Okay, just got that going. Next, get an X particle system. Choose emitters, create a new emitter, call this one base, and then change the emitter shape to object. I'm going to drop our sphere in there and change the emit from to texture. Drop our base texture map in there, and then turn off color channel because we don't really need it to change the color of the particles. And we go to our emissions, and let's set this birth rate down to about 500 with 0 speed, and we'll change the display just to a white square so that we can see what they're doing. So if we push play, it's going to start creating the particles across the surface using that noise map. Okay, so that's good, that's what we wanted to do. Now we want these particles to also build a vertex map. So we'll use the wet map tag for that. So select the tag and drop your emitter base emitter into the particle sources, And you can select now the vertex map and push play, and you'll see in real time the map being generated. You can see it's creating the vertex map based on that noise growing. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to deform the mesh with the yellow. So wherever it's yellow, it pushes out the mesh. So to do that, we're going to select our sphere. We're going to control, hold, and add a displacer. And with the displacer, we're going to choose shading, shader, color. And you can see the color being white pushes out the size of the sphere. So if we go down to 0%, you'll see you're now controlling how big the sphere is, and we can go up to about 20 centimeters or whatever works for the shot. But it's doing it globally, and we want it to be local to the vertex map. So to do that, we need to restrict it. So right click on the displacer, choose Cinema 4D tags, and add a restriction tag, and then drop the vertex map into the first name link. And you can see that creates a restriction and it deforms the mesh only on the yellow areas. So if we push play now, you can see it build the mesh as the particles are born. Okay, so that's good, that's what we want. Now there's a priority delay in this. If I go back to frame 0, it'll stay there. You can just refresh it, go up a frame and back a frame. Next thing we want to do is we want to grow some particles for the second lot of crystals. So we're going to create a new emitter, or we can copy this one. Just call this one crystals. This one selected, we'll change our display, go to display, make it a red color, and let's go for boxes for now. We're going to choose extended data, use rotation, and set that to tangential so that the orientation of the particles is pointing on the normals. I'm going to go to emissions and change the radius. We'll keep it at 1, but we want a variation of 1 so that there's 100% variation between the particle sizes, and we will use a scale modifier to help scale them up. I'm going to change the birth rate down to about 100 for now, and we can tweak these numbers later if we need to. And we want these ones to be talking to the outline map, which is this one here. So go into the objects and drop the outline texture in here, and these textures you can label them so it's more obvious, but it should be okay for now. Call this one outline, this one, oh no, that was base, and this one is outline. It'll just help with when you're trying to look through things, you can see it's now called outline rather than texture. Okay, so let's get some crystals in there. Let's see how that's working. Okay, it's creating our little cubes. Orientation's working. We might need some more, so let's go and put in a couple of hundred, let's say 3, and let's create some geometry. So we're going to go and we're going to add a cylinder, just move it to the side, and I'm going to set the segments to 5. You can make that editable, so hit C on your keyboard. Points mode, we need to just select it all and right click and optimize it. And that's just going to weld all the points because cylinders have unconnected points. Then we can scale down the base and go into points mode, drag the center point up. So, and then you can just slightly tweak a few of these points to help make it look more crystal, like so, and then we'll go to edge mode, select these edges, we'll bevel those quickly, so we'll just put a slight bevel on it just to give it a bit of a structure. I'm going to turn off font break and add about 3 subdivisions. And with our font tag, I'm going to go in there and just set that to about 20%. Okay, so that's our base crystal. We can scale that down. And then with the axis, we want it to be at the bottom of the mesh, and we want our z-axis to be facing up, and that way the orientation will face the normals. So just rotate it so that your z-axis, the blue one, is pointing up. Okay. Scale's not that relevant because the generator is going to base the scale on our emitter. So let's get a generator and drop the cylinder in there and make sure the emitter is talking to our crystals. You see it's created the crystals there. Go into scale and rotation and change the scale from particle scale to particle radius. That creates the little structures there. And obviously that's too small, so this is where we need the scale modifier. So we're going to add a question. Actually, we'll see if we need to. Let's just get the scale modifier. And we're going to use particle radius. Let's see how it looks by default. We're going to clamp within the range as well, and maximum of 20. So let's see how big that grows to. So the speed needs to be tweaked because it's growing too slowly. What I'm interested in is how big they'll actually grow to. Okay, that's good. 20 works fine, and the 20 is based on particle scale. So what we want to do is we want to speed up how fast they grow, and that's the radius change. So let's set this to something like 3. Let's see how that looks. So quickly popping up, getting to the maximum height. But because we have this clamp within range, that means we're going to get the variation in the overall sizes. So they're not all the same size, and that's working well. Cool. So the next thing we want to do is we want to look at getting the baseline crystals as well, and we're going to get another generator, and this is going to talk to the base particles. And again, we want to go in and make sure that these ones have some rotation. You can set that to random rather than tangential, because we want them just to randomly be on the surface. So we're going to go and we're going to use a platonic guy there and drop that into the generator. Generator's talking to the base, and again with this with the base particles, we're going to use 1% 1-to-1 variation. Set this one to talk to particle radius, and that's a bit big, so can scale it down, but it's talking to this scale modifier, so we want to ignore that one. So go to modifiers and put that in exclude list, and we call this one crystals, main crystals, and then we can copy this guy and call this one base crystals. and then exclude base crystals from the main crystals. So now each one has their own scale modifier. We can go into this one and put a maximum, let's say 5, and we'll see how that looks. Let's just give these guys a color now. So we go into our display, change that to blue. Okay, so that's creating them, and yeah, the maximum size works well. They're not too big, but they're forming in the right spots. Now you can add more simply by adjusting the amount of particles that are emitted on each of these emitters. We're going to leave it as it is for this one, just because we're showing you how to build it. But if you want more particles like we used on the example, I think there's 1,000 particles a second, and that just also helps with the deformations, but it also gives you a nice grouping of the baseline particles. So just tweak how many you use. It'll slow down a little bit. You can do things like set the generators to clone type render instances, and that will help speed it up. But what that will do is put the generated objects visible, so you just need to simply, let's scale this one down. Scale that down, and then just hide them. If you can hide them, put them to the side or put them inside the base mesh. So that they're not visible at any time. Yeah, so they're hidden nicely, and then you can just keep on working with it being slightly quicker because you're using render instances instead of generated particles, objects. Okay, so we're not going to go into texturing or anything. This was more about how to set up the system, and because it's quite procedural, this system, you can easily change your base mesh. So let's have a look at how to do that. I'm going to put the objects off to the side. So, and let's get a torus. Scale it down a bit. And all you need to do is copy all the tags across. So let's make the torus editable and give it a lot more segments. So crank it up so that there's a lot of segments in your pipe. Make it editable, and then copy all the tags across. Like so, and the displacer. So we can hide that sphere now. And make sure your emitters are talking now to the torus. So just drop that in. Okay, so they've still got the same texture tags, which are these ones. So it should just work straight away. Okay, so it's starting to form over there. Create the cool structures. So that's how procedural it is. It's easy to swap out the base mesh and change it to anything you need. Okay, so let's have a last look at the video.